Hey everybody, my name is Greg. Just to give you a little bit of background on myself, since this is kind of all about side hustles, I might as well tell you what my day job is. I work over at Pixar over in Emeryville across the bay. I've been there for about 8 years now, and during that time I've made a lot of models in our movies. I work in the environments department there, and as you can probably tell, modeling and model making is a very central aspect of my life. I do it for work. I make models for pleasure. I have 1,000 projects, at home that I'm using modeling in some capacity to do, and I'm going to tell you about one of them that just kind of by happenstance wound up being a sort of side business that I run in addition to my 9 to 5, and hopefully, learning about my story of how this just kind of happened to be is interesting to some of you guys. But this is one of those side projects that originally just started off as something that was fun and interesting for me to do. And these are the model kits that I make. I design these myself, produce them through in my apartment in Oakland. And it's kind of that same situation that you've seen maybe at a craft store or something like that, those wooden skeleton kits. It's kind of my own take on this kind of tried and true idea, but with my own designs, better materials, and with an eye to aesthetic to hopefully make it look like the real thing when you actually assemble the model. And kind of to back up, originally this was just something that I did for fun. I'm sure this place doesn't need any introduction to most people in the room here. I started learning to use the lasers at Tech Shop, originally just to help my sister with a centerpiece for her wedding, and I was like, oh, it'd be great to learn the CNC machines and start working on my own projects there. I didn't have any knowledge ahead of time of using lasers or making the files for them outside of using Maya to model like I do for my work. And this is the laser center over there. And quickly when I took the class, I immediately was my eyes were open to the possibilities of being able to use these machines and make all kinds of interesting things. And so after I did the initial project, that's the centerpiece I made for my sister's wedding that kind of got me started on it. I started having all kinds of ideas of ways I could use the technology and make my own projects. And one time I was over at Paxton Gate over in the Mission, and they had all these really cool, intricate animal skeletons and bones and that kind of thing. And I was like, this would be really cool if I could maybe take this idea of a slide together model kit and maybe do my own thing with it, and just to see if I could get close to a real looking animal using this idea. So I used Maya to do all of my design work. I kind of modeled the entire kit inside 3D. So basically everything slides together and is engineered the way it fits together in the real thing, but in Maya. I generate a bunch of parts from that, turn those into vector files, and then cut them on a laser. And originally when I started doing this about 5 years ago, I was using the Tech Shop lasers to just cut all my designs that I was messing with. And the first proof of concept that I kicked out of the machine, it was really awesome. I was like, holy crap, this actually works. I can kind of make something that looks convincingly real, out of parts that I cut myself from the machine. And I just had them, the frog was the first one that I did. I did a few more, and I just had them on my desk at work. And I had a number of coworkers who came up to me and was like, you should totally sell these things. And I was like, maybe. It's interesting. It was awesome that John touched on a number of things of like the economics of selling something like this, an idea that you have. And it was originally something that I didn't know anything about. And once I started looking into it, it's like, okay, a sheet of material that I use Delrin to cut these guys. And a sheet of that, costs $20. Laser time, it takes about an hour to cut an entire sheet, but I can get, between 10 and 15 kits out of a single sheet. And if I charge, around like $10, $15, $20 for a kit, which as a model maker, I'm kind of like, yeah, that's a reasonable area to be for that. Like people would pay that. I could totally maybe sell these. And so I just started out small and started making all the instructions, which is this whole other deal, with, I could build all my prototypes myself, But now that I'm going to try and sell them to people, it's like, all right, I've got to actually be able to let other people build these things too. So it's kind of a nightmare putting all the instructions together and testing it with everybody. And I give them all to my friends, and they assemble them, and I give them back to me with notes and kind of revamp everything until I have something that is buildable by somebody that just picks it up off of a shelf or orders from me online. I do all my photography myself and all the packaging. And then, at the end of the day, I have, a bunch of these kits, and I started selling, going to shows. I started out like locally at the Alternative Press Expo that they hold here in San Francisco. I, went to some comic conventions in, LA, and I've recently been going to San Diego Comic-Con and selling these as well. And it just eventually got to a point where there were enough people that dig my stuff, and I opened up a little Etsy store, which is incredibly easy to do. You can just set it up and put the stuff out there, and there's a minimal fee for each listing that you put out, and it kind of opens the door for you to be able to sell to people all over the world if you want to ship internationally. And basically, at a certain point, as I was doing this, and kind of keeping track of all my numbers and what my expenses were with my materials, after I crunched the numbers, I was like, yeah, this is feasible for me to buy my own machine and start producing this stuff out of my home. Because up until this point, maybe 2 years into this, I was still using the tech shop and going over there every other night or every 3 nights, and reserving my 2-hour time slot, and producing as much as I could in that span of time, which is like, once I got enough orders, it was like, this just isn't really ideal for me any longer. And at that point, I considered, I was like, I might look into buying my own device. And I remember when I first started using the tech shop, I was really enamored with the laser, and I was like, this is an amazing machine. I was like, oh, I might want to buy one of these. How much does it cost? I asked the guy that was teaching my class, and he was like, oh, this is like a $25,000 machine. And I was immediately like, oh, okay, that's never going to happen. But a few years later, I ended up getting my own machine, and it's just started again from something that was just something I did on a whim, something that is just interesting to me because I just like making stuff, and it just organically evolved into something that I can make a little bit of money on the side, in addition to my 9-to-5 job. And yeah, that's my setup at home, and that's where I fabricate all my stuff and package it and ship it out. I sell primarily online through Etsy, and do a couple of shows a year, and it's also allowed me to do a whole bunch of other really cool stuff that I wouldn't otherwise have done before without the use of my own device. The machine I use is an Epilogue 60-watt laser. It's the same ones that they use over at the tech shop, if any of you've used the laser area over there. And yeah, so a whole bunch of fun projects that I've done in the intervening years that it's just like, I probably never would have done these because I don't have access necessarily to a CNC machine before I had mine. Just kind of it sort of opened the door for future endeavors and other projects that I like to do. And it's fun too that John touched on the economic breakdown of like, what is worth your time. What amount of money is worth your time and effort and dedication to be able to fabricate a custom thing for a person that wants to buy it. And in the case of a lot of these projects, like this, this is a bridge that I fabricated for a train layout that's in my office at work. It's like I would probably never be able to sell this even if people would want to buy it, because it just takes too much time and effort and material cost. Like the material loan for this guy was about $150 or $200. Not to even mention all the time it takes to assemble the thing. But for myself, it's great. But in the case of the project that I do with the skeletons, it's dead simple. You have small pieces of laser cut plastic. The machine does most of the work for you. It's all in the design of the idea, and figuring out something that is, in my case, something that I think looks lifelike and that people will be interested in getting for themselves. That is also economical for me to be able to fabricate myself. And that's kind of like an interesting, little, great spot to be, and if you're thinking of your own ideas. Yeah. You guys have any questions for me about any of this stuff? Yeah.
How long did it take for you to earn enough to justify
I'd say it was probably, I would say the first like year or so where I was just tinkering with this more so. It was probably 2 years in where I started, putting. I had things out there enough. I was making enough orders. I'd gone to enough shows where I looked at. I'd made some money, and it was like, oh, if I follow, kind of the trend of all the stuff that I'm producing, I can actually see how another year or two it would be a justifiable purchase to make, and it actually ended up being less than that. It's kind of hinges all around how much effort that you also want to put into this. I have a full-time job during my day, so it's like I don't want to be a factory when I go home every night, but it's kind of occupies this great spot, especially if you have your own CNC machine, which again I didn't have when I started. Since the machine is doing a lot of the lifting for you, the amount of time you have to spend on it is minimal, and I have the luxury of being able to push this stuff and work on this project where I want to, and then when I don't feel like it, I can just run my machine and fabricate stuff and fill orders, and it's pretty easy. So, and yeah, like I said, I've been doing this about 5 years. I've had my machine for 3, I'd say. So, all right. Well, thank you very much, you guys.